Imagine throwing an epic house party, only to have your HOA shut it down with their petty rules, then getting revenge by blasting silent party speakers right on their roof. Stick around for a wild tale of neighborhood drama, sneaky retaliation, and a showdown that'll leave you speechless. If you love juicy HOA drama, over-the-top Karen meltdowns, and neighbors getting what they deserve, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and ring the bell so you don't miss a single story. Let's dive into this crazy tale. The summer heat hung heavy over the manicured lawns of Willow Creek, a suburban enclave where every mailbox matched and every hedge was trimmed to perfection. In this pristine neighborhood, the Homeowners Association ruled with an iron fist, their rule book thicker than a phone directory, and their president, Margaret Hensley, a woman whose pinched face and hawk-like eyes struck fear into every resident. Margaret, a retired accountant with a penchant for control, patrolled the streets in her golf cart, clipboard in hand, noting infractions like a general inspecting her troops: a blade of grass too long, a car parked an inch over the line, or a mailbox with a smudge. She'd slap a fine on you faster than you could blink. For the residents of Willow Creek, her word was law, and defiance was unthinkable. Enter Jake Palmer, a 32-year-old graphic designer who just moved into a cozy 2-story on Maple Drive. Jake was different. He wasn't one for conformity, with his vintage band posters in the windows and a penchant for blasting rock music while he worked late into the night. His house, though neat, had a certain lived-in charm that clashed with Willow Creek's sterile aesthetic: a single gnome statue in the garden, a bright blue recycling bin instead of the regulation gray. To Margaret, Jake's house was a blemish on her perfect canvas, and she'd been watching him since the day he moved in, her pen poised to strike. Jake, however, had no intention of bowing to the HOA's tyranny. He'd heard the stories: fines for unapproved paint colors, warnings for kids' chalk drawings on driveways, but he shrugged them off. He'd bought the house to live freely, not to be micromanaged. So when his birthday rolled around in late July, Jake decided to throw a party. Not just any party, a blowout. A celebration of freedom, music, and good vibes. He sent invites to his friends, stocked the fridge with drinks, and set up speakers in his backyard. The plan was simple: good music, good company, and a night to remember. By 8 p.m., his backyard was alive with laughter, the thump of bass and the clink of bottles. The party was loud, but Jake kept it reasonable, mindful of the neighbors. He'd even dropped off cookies at the houses next door as a preemptive peace offering. But Margaret Hensley wasn't appeased by cookies. At 9:15 p.m., her golf cart rolled to a stop outside Jake's house, her flashlight cutting through the dusk like a spotlight. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. The citation slipped through Jake's mailbox was as cold as her demeanor. Violation: excessive noise after 9 p.m. Fine $200. Cease immediately or face further penalties. Jake found the note mid-party, his friends still dancing under the string lights. His blood boiled. He'd checked the local noise ordinance. His music was well within legal limits. This wasn't about laws. This was Margaret flexing her power. He turned the music down, but the party fizzled. His friends, sensing the tension, started leaving, and by 10:30 Jake was alone staring at the citation. He wasn't going to pay it. He wasn't going to let Margaret win. That night, as he lay in bed, an idea sparked, a way to fight back without breaking a single rule. Silent disco speakers, wireless headphones that let you party without a sound escaping. He could throw the loudest bash Willow Creek had ever seen, and Margaret wouldn't hear a peep. But Jake wanted to push it further. Why stop at his own yard? If Margaret wanted to play dirty, he'd take the fight to her. He'd put those speakers on her roof, right above her precious HOA office. It was bold, risky, and maybe a little insane, but Jake was all in. The next morning, he ordered a set of high-end silent disco transmitters and headphones, his mind racing with plans. This wasn't just a party anymore, it was war. Jake spent the next week plotting his revenge with the precision of a heist movie. He wasn't just going to throw another party. He was going to make a statement. The silent disco equipment arrived in sleek black cases, complete with 3 transmitters and 50 pairs of glowing LED headphones. Each transmitter could broadcast music to the headphones within a 500-foot radius, perfect for his plan. Jake's research was meticulous. He studied Margaret's house, a pristine colonial at the end of Elm Street, which doubled as the HOA's headquarters. The flat roof above her garage where she kept her office was accessible via a low trellis on the side of the house. It was perfect, out of sight from the street, hidden by a row of manicured shrubs. Jake scouted the area at night, noting Margaret's routine. She was in bed by 10 p.m., her lights off, her golf cart parked neatly in the driveway. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt oppressive, like the HOA was watching even in the dark. Jake recruited his friend Ethan, a wiry electrician with a knack for climbing and a grudge against HOAs from his own past battles. Ethan was all in, grinning at the audacity of the plan. They'd sneak onto Margaret's property under cover of night, set up the transmitters on her roof, and throw a silent party in Jake's backyard that would draw the whole neighborhood. The headphones would keep it legal. No noise complaints possible. But the real kicker? The transmitters would be broadcasting from Margaret's own house, a silent middle finger to her reign of terror. The night before the party, Jake and Ethan did a dry run. They crept through the shadows, avoiding the street lights that dotted Willow Creek like sentinels. Ethan scaled the trellis with ease, his movements silent, while Jake kept watch below. They tested the transmitters in Jake's yard, ensuring the signal reached Margaret's roof without interference. The headphones lit up in neon blues and reds, pulsing to the beat of a test track. It worked flawlessly. Jake felt a thrill he hadn't felt since he was a kid pulling pranks. This wasn't just about his birthday anymore. It was about showing the HOA they couldn't control everything. The party was set for Saturday night, and Jake spread the word quietly, inviting only those neighbors he trusted, the ones who'd grumbled about Margaret's fines at mailboxes or over fences. By Friday, he had 30 confirmed guests, all sworn to secrecy. He handed out the headphones explaining the silent disco concept, and their eyes lit up with mischief. The neighborhood was buzzing with a quiet rebellion, a shared desire to stick it to the HOA. Saturday arrived, and Jake's backyard was transformed. String lights crisscrossed above, a makeshift dance floor was set up on the grass, and a table groaned under the weight of snacks and drinks. The transmitters were ready, tucked into waterproof bags for the rooftop mission. As dusk fell, Jake and Ethan slipped out, dressed in black, their backpacks heavy with equipment. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that makes your pulse race. They reached Margaret's house without incident, the neighborhood asleep under its perfect facade. Ethan climbed the trellis, placed the transmitters in a corner of the roof, and secured them with adhesive strips. They were back at Jake's in under 10 minutes, hearts pounding, adrenaline surging. The party began at 9 p.m. sharp, the headphones glowing in the dark as guests arrived, their faces alight with excitement. The music started, a thumping EDM playlist that filled the headphones but left the night silent. It was surreal. Dozens of people dancing, laughing, living without a sound escaping. Jake watched from his patio, a grin plastered on his face. He'd done it. He'd thrown the ultimate party, and Margaret couldn't touch him. But as the night wore on, a nagging feeling crept in. Margaret wasn't one to miss a trick. Would she really sleep through this? The party was in full swing by 10 p.m. The backyard, a sea of glowing headphones bobbing to the silent beat. Jake moved through the crowd, high-fiving neighbors he barely knew, their usual HOA-induced caution replaced by a shared thrill of defiance. The silent disco was a hit. People danced without fear of fines, their laughter muffled, their joy contained within the headphones. It was freedom in its purest form, a rebellion wrapped in silence. But Jake couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. Margaret's house was dark, her golf cart still parked, but her absence felt too convenient. She was a woman who noticed everything. A stray leaf, a misaligned shutter. Could she really miss a party this big, even a silent one? Jake pushed the thought aside, focusing on the moment. The transmitters on her roof were working perfectly, broadcasting the music without a hitch. Ethan, stationed near the patio, gave him a thumbs up, his face lit by the neon glow of his headphones. The neighborhood rebels were united, and for once Willow Creek felt alive. Around 11 p.m., Jake noticed a new face in the crowd, a man in his 50s, wiry and unassuming, lingering near the snack table. He wore headphones like the others, but something about him felt off. His movements were too deliberate, his eyes scanning the crowd rather than the dance floor. Jake's gut twisted. Was this one of Margaret's spies? She'd been known to enlist loyalists, neighbors who traded favors for leniency on their own infractions. Jake sidled up to Ethan, whispering his suspicions. Ethan nodded, his eyes narrowing as he tracked the stranger. They decided to keep watch, but the party rolled on, the silent beats pulsing through the night. At midnight, the stranger slipped away, disappearing into the shadows beyond Jake's fence. Jake's unease grew, but there was no time to chase him down. The party was peaking, and he couldn't afford to break the mood. By 1 a.m., the crowd began to thin, guests slipping back to their homes, headphones tucked into pockets, their secret rebellion complete. Jake and Ethan cleaned up, their movements quick and quiet. They needed to retrieve the transmitters before dawn. Under the cover of darkness, they returned to Margaret's house, Ethan scaling the trellis once more. But when he reached the roof, he froze. The transmitters were gone. Jake's heart sank as Ethan climbed down, his face pale. Someone had been up there. Someone had known. They hurried back to Jake's, minds racing. Had the stranger seen them? Had Margaret been watching all along? The next morning, Jake woke to a new citation in his mailbox. Violation unauthorized equipment on HOA property. Fine, $500, immediate meeting required. The note was signed by Margaret herself, her handwriting sharp and unmistakable. Jake's stomach churned. She knew about the transmitters. She'd outplayed him. The meeting was set for that evening at the HOA office, Margaret's garage. Jake spent the day pacing, replaying the night in his head. The stranger had to be her informant, but how had they found the transmitter so fast? Had someone tipped her off? Ethan, ever the optimist, suggested they fight the fine, arguing that Margaret had no proof. But Jake wasn't so sure. Margaret didn't need proof, she had power. As the sun set, Jake walked to her house, the citation crumpled in his hand. The garage was lit up, a folding table set with her ever-present clipboard. Margaret sat at the head, her face a mask of smug satisfaction, flanked by two other HOA board members, their expressions equally cold. The room felt like a courtroom, and Jake was on trial. The meeting was brief but brutal. Margaret presented photos, grainy night vision shots of Ethan on her roof, the transmitters clearly visible. Jake's heart sank. She'd had cameras hidden in the shrubs watching her own house. The stranger hadn't been a spy, he'd been a distraction. Margaret had played them like pawns. She demanded the fine be paid by week's end, plus a public apology at the next HOA meeting. Jake left the garage, his defiance crumbling. He'd underestimated her, and now he was cornered. But as he walked home, a new spark ignited. Margaret had won this round, but the war wasn't over. He'd find a way to fight back, smarter this time. Jake spent the next few days licking his wounds, the $500 fine a bitter pill he had no choice but to swallow. He paid it online, the HOA's website mocking him with its sterile design and Margaret's name emblazoned across the header. The public apology loomed, a humiliation scheduled for the next HOA meeting in 2 weeks. Jake imagined standing before the neighborhood, Margaret's smug face watching as he groveled. The thought made his skin crawl. He wasn't going to do it. He'd rather move than give her that satisfaction. But moving wasn't an option, not yet. Instead, Jake turned his anger into resolve. Margaret had outsmarted him with her cameras, but he'd learned something. She was always watching. If he was going to fight back, he needed to be invisible. He spent hours researching HOA bylaws, local laws, and loopholes. The Willow Creek HOA rulebook was a labyrinth of restrictions, but it wasn't infallible. Jake found a clause buried in the fine print. All HOA fines required a formal vote by the board, with evidence presented to all members. Margaret's citation had come directly from her, with no mention of a vote. It was a small crack in her armor, but Jake would exploit it. He called Ethan, who was still fuming about the rooftop fiasco, and they hatched a new plan. This time it wasn't about parties or pranks, it was about dismantling Margaret's power from within. Jake started talking to neighbors quietly at first, gauging who was fed up with the HOA's overreach. There was Linda, a single mom who'd been fined for her son's skateboard ramp. Tom, a retiree hit with a $100 penalty for an unapproved birdhouse. And Sarah, a young lawyer who'd clashed with Margaret over her vegetable garden. They were a small but growing coalition, each with their own grudge. Jake proposed a simple idea: demand a special meeting to challenge Margaret's fines using the bylaws against her. If they could prove she'd bypassed the board, they could nullify not just Jake's fine but dozens of others. The neighbors agreed, and Sarah, with her legal background, drafted a formal petition. They needed 10 signatures to force the meeting, and by the end of the week they had 15. The petition was submitted, and Margaret had no choice but to comply. The meeting was set for the following Saturday in the community center, a neutral ground, not her garage. Jake prepared meticulously, gathering evidence of Margaret's unilateral fines, including his own. Sarah helped him compile a dossier, complete with timestamps and copies of citations that lacked board approval. The night before the meeting, Jake couldn't sleep, his mind racing with possibilities. If this worked, they could curb Margaret's power. If it failed, she'd come for him harder than ever. Saturday arrived and the community center was packed, a rare turnout for an HOA event. Margaret sat at the front, her clipboard untouched, her face a mask of barely concealed fury. Jake presented their case, his voice steady as he outlined the bylaws and the evidence. The room buzzed with whispers as neighbors saw their own fines reflected in his words. When the vote was called, the board, cowed by the crowd and Sarah's legal arguments, sided with Jake. Margaret's fines, including his, were declared invalid. The room erupted in cheers, but Margaret's icy stare cut through the noise. She wasn't done. As the meeting ended, she cornered Jake, her voice low and venomous, promising to make his life hell. Jake walked away, heart pounding, knowing he'd won a battle but not the war. The fallout from the meeting rippled through Willow Creek like a shockwave. Margaret's iron grip loosened, but she wasn't defeated. Fines slowed, but her golf cart patrols doubled, her flashlight sweeping driveways like a searchlight. Jake's victory had made him a hero to some, a target to others. Loyalists whispered about his troublemaking, while his allies, Linda, Tom, Sarah, and others, rallied closer. The neighborhood was divided, a powder keg waiting for a spark. Jake knew he couldn't stop. Margaret was plotting her next move, and he had to stay ahead. He and Sarah dug deeper into the HOA's records, uncovering years of questionable decisions, budget discrepancies, unapproved vendor contracts, even fines that seemed to target specific residents. They shared their findings in a private group chat, growing their coalition. By mid-August, they had enough support to propose a bold move, a vote to oust Margaret as HOA president. It was a long shot, requiring a 2/3 majority, but the momentum was theirs. The campaign was subtle but relentless. Flyers appeared in mailboxes, anonymous but professional, detailing Margaret's overreach. Jake and Ethan organized secret meetings at Sarah's house, strategizing over coffee and spreadsheets. Margaret fought back, her citations becoming pettier. A $50 fine for a faded house number, a warning for a car with a flat tire. But her desperation showed, and more neighbors joined Jake's side. The vote was scheduled for September, and as the day approached, tensions boiled. Margaret's loyalists spread rumors calling Jake an outsider, a disruptor. But the tide was turning. On the day of the vote, the community center was standing room only. Jake's coalition presented their case calm and factual, while Margaret's defense was a tirade, her composure cracking. When the ballots were counted, the result was clear. Margaret was out, replaced by Sarah, who promised transparency and fairness. The crowd roared, but Margaret stormed out, her face a mask of rage. Jake felt a weight lift, but he knew this wasn't the end. Margaret wasn't the type to fade quietly. That night, as he sat on his porch, the gnome statue in his garden now a symbol of defiance, he wondered what she'd do next. For now, though, Willow Creek was free, or as free as it could be. If you loved this wild ride of HOA drama, sneaky revenge, and neighborhood rebellion, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell for more crazy stories. Drop a comment with your own HOA horror stories. We want to hear them. See you in the next one.